2022 and a half KTM 250SXF Factory Edition is here. The Motocross Action Wrecking Crew is at Fox Raceway. We're going to be riding this thing today. I'm going to be breaking down all the details about this bike for you guys watching this video. It's going to be a lot of fun today. We're looking forward to it. The KTM 250 engine has been a strong one. It's been kind of the pioneer in high revving engines with a shorter stroke and a bigger bore inside the engine that really makes it rev up to 14,000 RPM. Honda and Kawasaki have kind of mimicked that bore and stroke ratio and really gone for high RPM engines in the past few years, while Suzuki and Yamaha have stuck with a more standard 250F stroke that creates a lot of bottom end power but less over rev. So 250F engine has been around for a long time from KTM. Now we have a brand new one to match the brand new chassis, to match the brand new bodywork, match the brand new frame, the brand new shock. We got a lot of new things on this 250SXF Factory Edition, and we're excited to break down all the details on this bike, share it with you guys in this video. So let's get into it. Factory Edition 250SXF from KTM. This thing is all new and it's a preview of the 2023 model, as the Factory Editions always are, but really this is kind of the first time that KTM's gone all out with the Factory Edition 250. Usually we see a Factory Edition 450 and then kind of later the next year the 250 gets the same upgrades, but KTM, they wanted to give Max Vohland, their premier KTM 250 Pro rider, this platform for 2022 season. They also updated the Husqvarnas for 2022 season as well. So this thing has all of the same upgrades that the 450 has. If you haven't seen our 450 Factory Edition tested video, you can check that out on our YouTube and website. This thing's got the same body work. It's got the same exact frame as the 450 actually as well. So the new 250 engine and the new 450 engine and next year the new 350 engine all work with the same exact frame. So that just makes things easier for KTM to produce engines. KTM 250SXF has a brand new engine, and this thing has been a long time coming. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, KTM was really the pioneer in high revving 14,000 RPM engines in the 250 class. And now they've gone to an even bigger bore and a shorter stroke with a bigger piston pushing a lot more air through this engine as well now on this 250. So everybody's been kind of chasing Yamaha in the bottom end power department, and KTM's before had a lot of torque. They had a lot of high end horsepower. A lot of riders were appreciating the bottom end of the Yamaha YZ250, and KTM said it themselves, we're trying to get more bottom end out of our 250 engine, and the upgrades that they made to the mapping and to the engine on this new model were tailored to do that. As with the frame, as mentioned in the 450 video, it's got a totally new frame. The main things that you can notice is that the backbone of the frame that kind of comes from the triple clamps all the way down below the seat to where the shock mounts, now it comes apart and it turns into two parallel frame spars that go down to the foot pegs. It almost looks more like an aluminum frame bike that kind of has the frame that comes down to the side going straight to the foot pegs, instead of that super long backbone that you've been used to seeing on KTM frames. Same steel material used for the frame, but now the frame splits off. This means that it really separates the shock and the front of the motorcycle to change the handling characteristics. The bodywork is very exotic on this new thing. It is very sharp on the shrouds. The front number plate has some kind of weird triple clamp guards that come off of it, and unfortunately those don't come off very easily. Those same style guards used to come on Husky front number plates previously, and you were super easy to take off. These new ones are made into the front number plate, so it's got these real weird triangles that come off, and I'm not really a fan of them, and they don't even cover the triple clamps all the way, but it's going to be kind of difficult to take those off. You might need an aftermarket front number plate if you want to go back to a traditional look there. Front fender and rear fender are also wider now to just protect, so there's less roost coming up and hitting you in the face. I've never really had problems with that before, at least I didn't think so. They are wider now, front and rear. Also the rear end of the bike, the plastics come out symmetrically, so on the right hand side you have the muffler coming out that kind of builds a bulge in the plastics. On the left hand side, there's no muffler, but they made the plastics bulge out on the left as well to help you squeeze the bike a little bit better. They also mentioned that they were looking for more contact points with the bodywork on these new KTMs, and personally I didn't have a lot of problems squeezing the bike before, and I didn't feel like it was a lot better to squeeze now, but some riders do appreciate that. The foot pegs are also wider now, but the foot peg mounts are further into the frame. So there's more foot peg to put your feet on, but it actually doesn't stick out any farther, so it won't catch in ruts any easier now of the adjustment on just the position of the foot pegs. The shock is completely new. It's shorter, it's a little bit lighter. It's got a compression adjuster and a high speed and rebound adjuster at the bottom. So it's got 3 different adjusters on it that you can all move with your fingers, adjustable by hand, just like the forks are. So that's pretty unique. First company to do that. They did it with the forks and now they did it with the shock. It's a little bit hard to get your hand in there because the plastics cover a little bit of the top of the shock. A little bit difficult, but it is still cool that you can pull over on the side of the track and make adjustments on the fly. You don't need to leave a flathead screwdriver out there to mess with the forks, and you don't have to do it to mess with the shock now either. So that's pretty cool. Interesting to note, although it is a new shock and although the frame is totally new, the rising rate of the shock and just the shock action isn't made to be totally different than before. The linkage is new now, but the way they maneuvered it is that it's a little bit higher up, so it's not gonna drag the ground as easily when you case jumps or going over, whoops or something like that. The rising rate was adjusted so that it'd be similar to where the bike handled before. The forks have one minor adjustment, but really pretty much the same forks as they were before. So the forks, you will be able to put aftermarket forks on from last year's model onto this bike. The shock, you can't take your aftermarket shock from last year onto this bike because the shock's shorter now. The mounting points are different, and you won't be able to do that, so you'll have to buy a new aftermarket shock if that's what you have. Along with the frame and engine and bodywork, we also got a new swing arm on the KTM 250. It's supposed to be a little bit stiffer, and to work with the stiffer swing arm is a smaller 22mm rear axle instead of the 25mm axle that came on this bike previously. So I mentioned this in our 450 video, I'll mention it again. If you have aftermarket wheels, you can put those on your new model even though the axles are different, because KTMs are super cool and super cost friendly because the axles ride on the wheel spacers and not really on the internals of the hub. So that means that you can just change the spacers out from last year's bike on and switch it out to 2022 and a half factory edition spacers or 2023 spacers, and your aftermarket wheels from last year will fit right onto this bike. So chain guide is totally different. Also talking about the chain is the engine was rotated 2mm backwards. This lowers the countershaft sprocket 3mm to lessen chain torque. So instead of moving the swing arm pivot or anything like that, they were actually rotated the engine. That helped centralize mass and helped fit this engine into this frame, but it also helps create a straighter line for the chain, which means less chain torque and less squatting when you hit the throttle. So bikes squat when you hit the throttle. Now there's a little bit less squatting, and that is to help with supercross whoops, also to help with just creating a plush rear shock feel over braking bumps and acceleration bumps. So that's pretty cool. Diving into the engine, this thing has a much bigger bore and stroke now. So the bore and stroke now is 81 bore to a 48.5mm stroke. Last year's bike, which was already a big bore short stroke, last year's was a 3mm smaller bore at 78, and it had a 58.2 stroke. KTM has been known for having a big bore short stroke engine. Now it's even bigger bore, shorter stroke, pretty wild, but they did that to try to find some more bottom end torque and keep the over revability that the KTM 250SXF has been known for. Diving into how this bike worked on the track, first we'll talk about the engine. This thing was a little bit louder than last year, but it wasn't over the top better than last year's bike. We did bring the 2022 KTM 250SXF to ride back to back, and our old bike broke it in and it runs really good. This bike was still getting some time to break in. So when we got the bike today, it had an hour on it. We put almost 2 hours on it today, but talking to KTM, they say the bikes really free up, the engines really free up around the 6-hour mark, and that's where we expect it to get a little bit better. Obviously, it's only gonna be at 2 hours for a short amount of time, and you're just gonna keep getting better as you get to the 6-hour mark and onward from there. So talking with Brian Medeiros and Josh Fout, the two other test riders that I had riding back to back the current model versus this factory edition today, we were trying to decipher how the engine feels on the track. It definitely feels stronger in the mid-range and it definitely feels good on the top. It doesn't feel like a bad engine. It wasn't as exciting as we expected. You know, KTM has had that previous engine for a long time. It's been a class-leading engine, great torque, great horsepower, and great revability, super smooth to ride. It's been a really good engine. But now that KTM has came out with this new 250 engine, we expected a little bit more. We expected a little bit of a hit off the bottom. I would say it is stronger, but after one day of testing, I can't jump up and down and say this engine is the best engine I've ever ridden. I can tell you that we are gonna ventilate the airbox cover. KTM has vented airbox covers that they didn't bring today, so that was a little bit weird, but we took the airbox cover off, and as with any model, Suzuki, Kawasaki, Yamaha, if you take the airbox cover off, you're gonna get more air to the engine, it's gonna breathe better, and it's gonna go faster. That was the case with this model. Even though it has those air inlets that come out through the top, kind of the Superman seat grab holds, those are not handles to lift your bike onto the stand. That just, you don't get very good leverage if you pull up right there. You still have to pull up at the rear fender. Those holes are made to get more air into the airbox, and I'd say they work, but we're still gonna put holes in our airbox cover, so that's pretty funny. And yeah, wrapping up the engine and how it worked on the track, I'd say it's stronger and better to start out, but I think as we get more time on this motorcycle, we might find that it continues to break in and maybe gets a little bit better at that 6-hour mark. Talking about the mapping and how that works, map 1 and map 2 is a bigger difference than it was before. It was almost impossible for the average rider to notice the difference between map 1 and map 2 on the current model. This model is definitely a bigger jump in between. It still comes with traction control, and it comes with that new quick shift option that we talked about in our 450 video. So it is different, but it's not map 1 to map 2. It's not like you're wheeling with one and you're not wheeling with the other. They're both smooth, strong maps, and I would say it's a bigger difference between the two. The green map is definitely more aggressive, but not head over heels. Not quite, you know, twisted development ECU with a Vortex ECU with twisted development mapping. It's not that big of a difference. But like I said, this is our first day of testing. Only we rode a fairly smooth track today with no major hills or anything like that. Another note with the mapping, this bike does come with the quick shift option that comes on the 450. It's very unique. Some say, some love it, some hate it. We're gonna put some more time on it to really figure out our opinion on it. I wasn't a huge fan of it because it just sounds weird when the quick shift is engaged. It cuts the ignition and it sounds like the bike is bogging, which is never a good sound, but it does shift quickly, and even in the stock form, these models shift super easily. So for me, I'm a no quick shift guy, but I know other test riders will probably appreciate that option. So we're gonna put more time on it to really figure out how it works on the track. The handling was a huge plus on this model. Because the rear shock, where it mounts and where the energy goes through the rear wheel, linkage, swing arm into the shock, because of that energy is now not going into the top tube of the frame, really the backbone, it definitely handles better. We got more rear wheel traction, more balance overall in the motorcycle. We didn't feel as much feedback in the handlebars and in the grips coming into corners when we hit braking bumps. Today, the track wasn't very rough, as you guys see in this video, so we're excited to ride some rougher tracks this week, this weekend, and in the upcoming weeks to see really how the suspension handles when the track gets tougher. I do like the feature where the rear shock is kind of separated from the frame a little bit. I think it's gonna be good, as well as the smaller rear axle works well. We got good traction on this bike. Other things to note, this is a factory edition model. We're testing it because it's a brand new model and it's a preview of what we're gonna get in 2023. But a lot of these parts won't be on the 23 model, so you won't get the orange frame, you won't get the skid plate, you won't get the factory edition wheels and the orange sprocket, and you also won't get the factory edition triple clamps and stuff like that. The 2023 model won't have the exotic orange seat cover and the Red Bull factory team replica graphics. So the KTM 250 factory edition costs $10,499 and it's available at dealers now, but it's gonna be hard to get your hands on these as there's a limited production. They only brought in 400, enough for what they need to meet the AMA's eligibility to race these things in AMA Supercross and Motocross. It is only our first day. We had 3 test riders, 1 track. It was a good time riding this bike, but we still have more time to go. We're gonna be riding these at Glen Helen. We're gonna be testing them at other tracks here in Southern California, and we're gonna be putting them up against some of our other bikes as well to really feel the differences. So we'll have a Rockstar Edition Husqvarna 250 video coming out in probably about a month, That bike is very similar to this one, but by the time we get to that video, we'll have a lot more information for you guys about how it works on different tracks. Also, check out Motocross Action Magazine, as we will have a full in-depth article about this bike in there, talking about the pros and cons of the new 250 Factory Edition. So thank you guys for tuning in. Click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel if you appreciate these videos, if you like them. Also, click the notification button on YouTube so you can get a notification whenever we upload a video. Leave a comment down below if you want to know any more about this bike. If I have the answer and I see your comment, I'll do my best to answer and give you guys that information. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys want to watch some more videos, click the thumbnails now.